And hello again, everybody. Welcome to Street Beat, the official podcast of the Delaware County GOP. Thank you for being with us today. Our guest is Frank Agovino, the chairman of the Delaware County GOP. Frank, welcome to the podcast once again.
It's great to be here.
I want a status report. What has been going on in Delaware County? Because I'm really impressed that some of these races now are very tight with the candidates, the slate of candidates that we have on the Republican Party.
Well, there's so much going on in the county with the party. I mean, people are definitely energized. We're seeing volunteerism at an all-time high.
Awesome.
Our headquarters building is alive every day. Folks volunteering not only for the president, but for all of our local candidates. Mm-hmm. So it's really been good to see. Small donations have really picked up. So folks are doing their part. So there's a lot to be excited about, and we're really looking forward to the outcome of the election.
What do you think is making the difference, Frank? Do you think some of these issues that are impacting our society have drawn people to become more interested in what's going on politically?
Absolutely. The economy is definitely a thing. The people that can least afford it are the ones that are being hit the hardest, for sure. Mm-hmm. The folks will tell you that inflation is better. It's just not rising as quickly as it was before. But the cost of items in a grocery store is still really way too high. For a family, it's more difficult to make ends meet than ever before. So we're hearing a lot about the economy, certainly, and people are starting to take notice of international affairs too. We hear a lot of talk about that because there's a feeling that the world's a powder keg, and the other option, if Ms. Harris, the vice president, would win. There's a lot of people that feel that that's a scary proposition.
Yes.
At least with the president, the former president, that he has experience, and he is a little unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And people feel like that's actually an advantage, that he'll stand up for America. You don't know exactly what he's going to do, and foreign adversaries have to be on notice. And I think people are talking about that too. So it's just, the pendulum is swinging back a little bit. I mean, we're experiencing some gains in registration, which is really exciting.
Yes.
2017 is when we lost control of the courthouse council, and we really have no representation to this day in county government. And nobody really likes that, right? At the end of the day, very few people are for one party rule. You need some representation from both parties, certainly. So, we hear a lot about that. In 2017, when we did lose, that was sort of the beginning of a hemorrhage. And we started really falling behind in registration. Yeah. At the peak, we were down about 60,000, 62,000 in raw numbers. We've worked our way back to about 58,000. So we're heading in the right direction. The last 2 weeks, we saw serious gains in the last 2 weeks that we haven't seen in about 12 years. So there's definitely something happening. We also have to be mindful that the independent voter or unaffiliated voter is also growing quickly in Delaware County. That number is up over 60,000 in independent voters. I anticipate that in 2 to 3 years, that number will be close to 100,000 the way it's growing. Mm-hmm. So that presents an opportunity for the Republican Party to be able to talk to those folks.
Yes.
And because those folks are telling us, they're not happy with really either side. They're not happy with a lot of the things they're seeing. And so it gives us an opportunity, a pathway to have a conversation with them again and say, take a new look at the Republican Party here in Delaware County. So, we plan on doing that, and we think we have a lot of great things to talk to them about.
Well, yes, indeed. And you must be doing something right, because a lot of the races now here in Delaware County are really tight, which we had not seen before. And you can go on a broader scale and look at our race for Pennsylvania Senate between McCormick and Casey, and you see that the Cook Political Report moved it from leaning Democrat now to toss-up.
Right.
So there is definitely a dynamic out there where the paradigm is shifting.
Sure. And you know, Dave McCormick's a perfect example. He's extremely hard worker, and he understands the importance of a message and talking to people. And we have to, as a Republican Party, and Dave knows this, and he's sort of held the banner for us, that we do need to fight back, because what the Democrat Party has done to the Republican Party, not only locally but nationally, is paint us in a way that's just not true.
Right.
That Republicans are extreme and out of touch and crazy and not to be trusted, and it's just
it's the other way around.
It is crazy, but they have done a good job with that. If that's a good job, and we're fighting from behind. But you know, Dave went out there and raised some money to do it. Had a great campaign. Had the experience from a previous campaign, and been able to get the message out and talk to people. And it's starting to resonate with matters like abortion is one of those issues where we. Republicans in 22, when Roe was overturned, the Democrats went right to work and painted all Republicans as extreme on abortion. And it just, again, it wasn't true. What we find in Delaware County, it's still a very moderate county. And, when you talk to folks, a lot of folks, the law in Pennsylvania says is 24 weeks when it comes to abortion, and we don't anticipate that changing. But, there are other positions that people have. Like in Europe, they wonder, why we're fighting so much about abortion. And in Europe, they have this sort of 15-week acceptance. And, people get along, and they think Americans are crazy that we're fighting over this, with exceptions, of course. But wherever it is, whether it's 15 weeks, whether it's 24 weeks, whether it's exceptions, for the most part, Republicans fall somewhere in that reasonable range. And there's very few people. No one's looking to take people's rights away. But it was just a convenient narrative to help win elections.
Yes.
And it worked. It worked for them. And as a party, we were behind. We didn't know whether to respond or not respond. So they were pushing the narrative, painting us incorrectly, and they saw it was winning elections for them. And in politics, if something works, you typically don't switch it up. And we're seeing that even in our local state rep races, where candidates, paid for by the party, by the Democrat Party,
right,
are paying for mailers and digital, attacking our local candidates on this abortion issue.
Right.
And it's not really based in fact. And, they're counting on the fact that our local candidates, it's hard to raise money. It's hard to be well-financed.
Right.
It's hard to get your message out. Money helps get your message out. And when you don't have the dollars to do it, it's hard to do it in mass. And they're aware of that. Yes. And they have raised some money, and they hit us hard in these areas, and it's hard for us to tell people, they're really not telling the truth about this.
Right.
Our local candidates especially are community people. They're coaches, they're teachers, and they don't really care about a neighbor being a Republican or a Democrat. They want to win and govern for everybody, for all their neighbors. And these folks that have stepped up in an environment that is toxic at times, they deserve a lot of credit. But it's an honest group, it's a hardworking group, and they're making inroads. And so we're seeing these races are tighter because the other side is attacking them.
Yes.
And that's usually an indication that the other side feels like it's too close for comfort.
Yes, and I also think that people have moved on from the issue of abortion. If you look at the latest polls, you see the economy, inflation, the illegal immigration. Those issues now are taking priority over abortion, which has fallen down the slate of concerns for voters in general across the country, not just here in Delaware County and Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I would caution.
I think they've been knocking on that door too much. And people say, look, I'm more concerned about the price at the grocery store and the price I pay for gas gasoline. Those issues are very important to me, and you're not addressing them.
Yeah, I agree, but I would also have some caution because we thought that too in 22 as well. And as when everything settled, it was really just about abortion. Because remember,
because that's when we had the Supreme Court thing leaked about the Roe v. Wade, and it leaked. Everybody went berserk. And
it was a gubernatorial year,
right?
And we had our candidate at the top of the ticket was 100% pro-life candidate, and it fit perfectly into the paradigm. It fit perfectly into what they were trying to do.
Right.
And it was very convenient. And it had ripples beyond the Commonwealth. It really did to this day. So I caution people that it is not gone away yet. We'll see when the election's over how much of an effect it has. But I think you're right. There are other things that are in the pecking order ahead. For sure. But, I just lost my thought. Sorry.
That's all right.
But
no problem.
When it comes to abortion, it's getting new voters. That's what the Democrats did with abortion.
Right.
It was young women that hadn't registered to vote, that hadn't voted before. And if they were registered, they were low propensity as far as their voting. So that doesn't show up in the polls. It didn't show up in 22.
Right.
So we have to keep an eye on that as we move along, because is it going to be the same playbook as 22 where it showed up and it wasn't anticipated? So Democrats, I say very often that Republicans talk about issues, whether it's immigration, whether it's crime, whether it's the economy. And Democrats talk about votes, to make the pie bigger, right. And if you look, that has happened. Whether it's locally or at the national level, the pie keeps getting bigger. And that's the Democrats typically have done a good job as far as infrastructure and adding new people to the rolls. Right. And again, if you look at most folks at the end of the day don't really live in this world, right? They start paying attention to politics just weeks out because they're busy with their lives, soccer practice and going to work and doctor's appointments, and they tune in. And that's still the overwhelming majority of the population. And in Delaware County, it's a huge part of there's not a lot of uber political people at the end of the day. We live in this building and we see foot traffic at an all-time high and folks grabbing signs and volunteering, but it's still a very small percentage. There is over 400,000 registered voters in Delaware County. Right. Overwhelming majority of those folks are not super engaged. They just they want to know that somebody really cares at the end of the day for them, right? And wants to give them an honest effort and try and make their lives better. And I think that's important. That's part of the messaging that we are committed to, is having candidates to talk to our neighbors. And our Republican values are true. And mostly when you talk about what separates Republicans and Democrats, we can talk about the social stuff, but really it's for Republicans, it's mostly fiscal issues. Right. Folks understand their own personal budgets at home, and you have to, what you have to spend. And if you can't make it, you end up borrowing money on your credit card. And if you do that too often, it causes stress at some point and it breaks. And
that's what's going on with our taxes here in Delaware County.
That's right.
With one party rule that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And I think people are taking notice of that. Yeah. But I also think that the message is resonating because we're seeing a lot more Republicans voting early than we had seen previously.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's impressive. The numbers are really impressive, seeing early voting among Republican voters.
Yeah, I think early voting was definitely up this year. Also, mail-in ballots. Right. We haven't talked about them yet, and it's been a commitment of here at the local party to do better with mail-in ballots. If you go back in time when mail-in ballots started, we were in the midst of a pandemic. Right. And most people, I think, me included, when I heard about mail-in ballots and not really knowing much about Act 77 that had passed at that time, people thought it was a temporary measure because of the pandemic. The reality was it was very convenient when it was passed, and it's here to stay. And Republicans, and still to this day, Republicans were resistant to vote by mail. There's a palpable distrust for mail, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
But they can vote in person now.
But they can vote.
They can vote in person early. You can go to the courthouse, the government center behind the courthouse, and you can vote early, just in case something.
Yeah, if you're going to be out of town,
could happen on November 5th.
Sure.
And you're not able to get to the polls, or something happened to the machine.
Yeah.
And it broke, and now your vote's not being counted. Why take a risk? Go vote early.
Go vote early, and if you can't vote early, then certainly. I tell people, remember, if you do choose to vote by mail, I'm going to vote by mail this year, and I never have done it before.
Yeah.
And mostly because as party chair, I feel like I'm going to be in a lot of places that day. Lines are long. My services are needed that day. So I thought, okay, it makes sense for me to vote by mail. But should I have a window, I could always decide to bring my mail-in ballot with me and vote in person.
Yes.
So that's an option for people.
Take it right there to the government center.
Take it right there to your polling place, hand it in and vote. And, if some people vote by mail because they think they may be away, they may be on vacation, things, a business trip that might fall through, and then they choose to vote in person. And you can still do that.
You could do that.
But mail, example, my mother-in-law is in her 80s and she has Parkinson's, and she has always voted in person. It's sort of a rite of passage. You meet friends and see people that you may only see once or twice a year.
Yes.
And it's part of that. But there's some days she wakes up and she doesn't feel great, and maybe election day might be one of those days. I hope not, of course. And she may say, I'm not really up for going out and voting. And, if she votes by mail, she doesn't need to worry about that.
Yes.
And then that's what we tell people. Life is unexpected. You just don't know what's going to happen. So just vote by mail. Seniors, typically vote Republican, especially in the county.
Right. So
we want to make sure that they're taken care of and their vote counts and is in the door. And I understand it. We hear it all the time.
Right.
And I've had myself sort of an evolution when it comes to voting by mail, right? There's this, there's different audiences when it comes to voting by mail, as far as that we'll call the skepticism. And it's a mild term, I'll say skepticism. Some folks say, there's something going on, I don't know what it is. But I just don't trust. I can't put my finger on it. Right. I just don't trust it. I don't like it.
Yes.
And then there are others that, go to meetings, of the election board, read the minutes, know the law, and hold people accountable to that.
Right.
And we do have a very active group in Delaware County that really is doing a pretty good job of looking out for our interests when it comes into counting the votes and voting by mail. And oftentimes, really what they want is the law to be followed. And, I get that. Because I was someone who voted in person my whole life. I didn't embrace the mail-in ballot at first. Right. I think a lot of Republicans in leadership didn't. Right. And I sort of was on that side that said, well, what are you guys making? What was there little green men running around and fixing it? But the reality is, what we find, again, back to one-party rule, is that there are violations of the law oftentimes, how votes are counted. And there are rights. You have rights as a resident. I have rights as a resident that, there are certain things that you can ask to see. Right. And we find many times that we're denied those rights. And that these folks are, really representing all of us. And they're going to meetings and they're really holding people to task. And, the emails that they get in response are, very dismissive, arrogant in tone. And I understand what they're doing, because if I have a right to do something and you don't let me do it, well, what's human nature? What's the reaction going to be? Unfortunately, it's distrust. like the law prescribes that I could do A, you're not letting me do it.
Right.
So we find that, and I've tried to be supportive of the folks that are really doing some hard work for us, and they're not doing it for any glory. They're not doing it for any pay. They're not, they're just trying to hold people accountable. So there's a lot of nuances that go on when it comes to vote by mail that are, make you raise an eyebrow at the very least. So those are things that are evolving. But as a party, though, we still think it's very, very important to encourage to vote by mail. And because we're
Or vote early.
or vote early. Either one is
You don't have to wait till November 5th. That's the point.
Absolutely. And people are doing it. We're seeing our numbers have grown. The Democrat numbers have come down for sure. So we've always said, based on in-person voting, typically we need, if we're going to have a chance to win some elections,
right,
we got to get to about 35% of the actual mail-in votes that are cast. And we're trending very close to that. When you look at new applications and new votes, we're not too far behind, actually.
Right.
It's just what occurred in 21, 22. The Democrats came out of the gate like gangbusters when it came to mail,
right,
and Republicans were resistant. And that number, that disparity is still there. We're chipping away at it a little bit, but we're still trying to catch up for what actually occurred the first 2 years that the mail-in ballots were on the scene. Because right now it's not horrific.
Right.
It's, we're behind, but again, Republicans are always going to vote in person more. It's just the way it's going to be. It's just, again, seniors.
But my point is, and that is, if you like to vote in person, as I do, I voted early. I went the other day to the government center behind the Delaware County Court.
Was there a line?
No, there was a little line, but it was a constant line.
Okay.
It was a steady little line. There were about 5 or 6 people, but the line kept around that time. I said, this is impressive.
Yeah.
And I asked the people at the counter, is this what you've been seeing? Yes.
Yes.
They have been seeing a steady line of people voting early. And that's the point I was trying to make. I'm one of those traditional people that like to vote on election day. It's always been that way with me. But I saw what was going on with the Democrats. I said, wow. They had an advantage there. They had all those people that were telling them, go out there and vote because you don't know what's going to happen on the day of election. And so they went out and you had some impressive numbers.
Yeah.
And that's my point. I'm just trying to say, make to assure your vote. And you know what? I feel such at ease now. I have it out of the way. That's one thing I don't have to worry about, that there might be a traffic accident or the machine could break down or something, heaven forbid, could go wrong. My vote is in.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And as a party, we're encouraging people to vote early and by mail. So to do exactly that, and it is it'll be interesting to see how the numbers fall through, because the concern, right? The concern would be, I'm an example, to some degree you're an example, is that we do vote in person, always. So if I'm going to vote by mail this time, there's no gain, there's no net gain, right? So is our increase in mail ballots really a rearrangement of the deck chairs, or is it really new people entering the party and voting by mail? Because that's the gold, right? That is bringing people in that are starting to, hear the message, understand who we are, giving us an opportunity to have a conversation and say, yep, I'm going to vote. Now, I know personally myself that I've had people reach out to me, quite a few over the last, say, couple of months, that were new voters, and they were on the younger side, whether they were a friend of a friend, a college age student or something of a friend. I've seen that quite a bit. So that does, that's encouraging, because ultimately, right now we have 208,000 Democrats. I think today we actually went over 150,000 Republicans. So, we still need some numbers. But we
can still see that, because the last day for voter registration is October 29th. So people still have a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's never too late. And actually, a young man here working in security here in the office had a conversation with him. He's not registered to vote. He's a young man, lives in Newtown Square.
So for those people like him, what would you say the viewers out there who have not registered to vote And how would you convince them they need to go do this and why it's important for them?
Well, especially for young people, they're the next generation, right? And there's a lot of things that need to be fixed in this country for sure. The way money is being handled at the local level, all the way up to the federal level, is really what imperils this country at the end of the day. Right. There is no way that we can continue to maintain the debt level that we have. And it's not generations out. It could be years out. And, financial crises.
And when you say the debt level, you're talking about the debt level of Delaware County, because eventually the taxpayer is going to have to make up the difference. Yeah. It's going to hit their pocketbooks one way or the other, whether it's here or there, somewhere they're going to see their taxes go up.
Well, I'm talking about on both levels. At the federal level, certainly that can create such a crisis, such a calamity, that it could affect the very fabric of America. At the county level, what it most will affect is your taxes.
Yes, right.
And, when you knock on doors and talk to people, and there's always the issues of the day, whatever it is, taxes always comes up.
Yeah.
Property taxes in Delaware County are too high.
Yes.
The model is broken. In Delaware County, all the southeast counties, we pay an inordinate amount of taxes into the Commonwealth kitty. Right. So it's a model to fund the school districts that really doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah.
So we need to, there's different ideas out there. We need to take a look at it all kinds of different ways. Seniors are getting hit very hard. Folks with just a couple kids, whatever it is just getting really, really difficult to make ends meet. And that tax bill comes around fast each year. So that is definitely an area in the county that we don't see any end in sight. The spending is still maddening. And we're looking at, we don't know. It's because we have folks that take a look at the budget and examine it. And unless there's a lot of money borrowed, we're looking at double-digit tax increases over multiple years.
This is what happens when you have one-party rule.
Right.
This is the end result.
There's no check and balance. No one to raise their hand
and say, "Are we spending a little bit too much? Maybe we should wait."
Right.
What does this mean for the citizens of Delaware County when you're spending all this money?
Yeah, because even if you're a minority party and you have somebody who's representing you on council, it's still a powerful position.
Right.
Because the folks that are in charge still have to say, okay, well, this guy's going on record or this girl's going on record to say this is too much. And these are the reasons that this person is saying that we're putting it on record. And that makes someone at least pay attention.
Yes.
And so even having that minority representation would go a very, very long way. We just don't have. And I think, I've served on different boards in my life, from school board and others. And we were always at the school board very, very cognizant of what we call herding.
Right.
And that is, you can get into a room with other board members and you close the door and you can talk yourself into just about anything.
Right.
You can make yourself think that you really got it figured out because there's nobody there to challenge you. There's nobody there. And, I was on a school board for 18 years and it was a very functional board. I actually was spoiled because it was the first board I ever was really a part of, and it was very functional. Nobody cared about party. It was just about the kids and the taxpayers and doing what was right. And that was the mentality we always had. And we had some senior members of the board then that taught us that, taught us very well that you can't close the door and just block out the light.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that in the county. And and that's a bit of arrogance as well, where you think because you're in charge, you can do anything and say anything you want and better and you don't have to listen to the other guys. And, we have a current party that's in charge that wants to talk about a Republican Party of 30 years ago, of 25 years ago, whatever. I don't really know about those things.
Right.
I mean, I hear stories. I get it. And the Republican Party in Delaware County was certainly an infrastructure, but it's a different time now. The faces are completely changed.
Yes.
And we're talking to voters differently. And now the party in charge almost wants to squash a grape with a sledgehammer. Like it feels like the goal is to do away with the opposition party, and that's not good. That's not good for Republicans. That's not good for Democrats.
Right.
That's what the Constitution. That's what this country is founded on. Those principles.
Exactly.
And I think again, I use the word arrogance because it's what I feel like it's very true. That there's too much of that herding that you get into the boardroom and you think you got it all figured out, and there's also there's this feeling of, well, you guys were in charge all these years and you did it and and this is a payback, but we weren't in charge. I was not in charge, certainly, and it's still about bringing people together. We can agree to disagree, and that's okay without having to try and kill each other and point fingers at each other. And we just need to get back to a better place. But we do need, our role as the opposition party is to point things out, because we can't change anything right now. We're confident that day will come. But right now we can't change it. And we need to say, you need to take a look at this. You need to take a look at how you're spending money. There's just some very, very basic things on how the county is running that just doesn't seem to make a lot of fiscal sense. And ultimately, you pay now or you pay later.
Right.
And what happens is oftentimes in government, the people that are in charge that make the decisions, when the stuff comes home to roost, those folks aren't there anymore.
Right.
Right. And I think that's
nobody home. It's somebody else now.
It's somebody else, and they got to figure it out.
They got to figure it out.
You find out where the bodies are buried now, and it's like, oh boy.
Yeah. Here we go again.
So here we go. So it's not fair. It's not fair to the voter. And I often think that the folks that are in charge at the county are not really representing Democrats in the county. I don't see. I have, I'm not this. I have friends that are Democrats. I have friends that are Republicans. I have lots of friends. I don't know what their party is, and I don't really care. So I think the folks that are actually in charge don't really represent most of the Democrats and their ideology in the party. I really don't. I think those folks are there's a lot of similarities between neighbors and friends with different party affiliates. It's a sliver sometimes that separates them.
Yeah.
And the folks that are in charge would have you believe that the Republican Party is this monster that you can't get behind. Yeah. No, it's fine. Our primary issue is our fiscal, right? That's the Reagan Revolution really was about that. Mm-hmm. And it was young people at that time, me included, that looked at that and said, yeah, I get it. It was a very simple premise, but the way they're spending money, it's going to imperil my future, right? And I think young people are starting to get that. I think Democrats get that. Republicans get that we're not monsters. That's our primary focus on it, is how you're spending money, how you're taxing people, and your priorities. We believe in a safety net. I think it was Mitt Romney that said it, right? Republicans believe in a safety net. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of how big is that net.
Yes.
And I think that's and that's okay to have that conversation, but to just be nasty with people because they don't agree with you is not the answer. Now, we're forced as a minority party, and we have to stand up for ourselves when, if people are going to come and punch us in the face, mm-hmm. We have to push back. And we need the resources to do that. We need to get more people on the voter rolls. We need more donations. We need to be able to get the message out. And because, a good defense is a good offense is a good defense, right? And which we need to be able to push back. So we're trying to build strength in the party, and at the same time tell folks as part of our messaging, we don't care what your party is. Give us a look, right? And whether you're Democrat or independent, the Republican Party is here for you. And we're not the people that they're trying to paint us out to be.
Well, if the polls and numbers are any indication, it seems that the Republican message is getting through
think so.
and making momentum. And that's a great thing. Frank Agovino, chairman of the Delaware County GOP, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate
And folks, thank you for being with us on this edition of Street Beat, the official podcast of the Delaware County GOP. We'll see you again soon.